The Ferrari died at 4:47 inches the afternoon, on a stretch of Route 2 that nobody uses anymore. Elena Hartwell had taken the old road on purpose. She always did, when she needed to think. The freeway was faster, but the freeway was noise, 18-wheelers and brake lights, and the particular kind of anxiety that came from moving fast without going anywhere. Route 2 inches November was different. The eucalyptus trees had gone yellow, and the hills beyond them were the color of smoke, and the road curved gently through the valley like something that had been drawn rather than built. She was 36 years old, and had not cried in 4 years. She was aware of this the way a person is aware of a healed fracture, not constantly, only when the weather changed. The meeting was in 90 minutes. The Harrington Group contract was worth $42 million over 3 years, and Elena had spent 8 weeks structuring it. She had not slept more than 5 hours the previous night. She was wearing a charcoal blazer over a white silk blouse, and she had rehearsed the final 3 minutes of her closing statement in the shower that morning until the hot water ran out. The engine stuttered first. A small thing, a hiccup of hesitation between second and third gear that she almost attributed to the road itself. Then the tachometer dropped. Then the dashboard lit up in red like a face full of bad news. And the Ferrari rolled to a stop on the gravel shoulder, as if it had simply decided it was done. Elena sat for a moment with both hands on the wheel. She called her assistant, Diane. Diane said she would send someone from the dealership, but the nearest authorized Ferrari service center was 37 miles away, and traffic was backed up on 101, and realistically it would be 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. Move the meeting, Elena said. The Harrington representative is already at the hotel. He flew in from Boston. Then push it to 7. Buy him dinner. Use the corporate card. She hung up and got out of the car. The air was cold and smelled of dry grass, and something distantly automotive oil, perhaps, or warm metal cooling. The valley spread out below the road in shades of ochre and gray. There were no other cars. There was, in the distance, what appeared to be a garage, a low white building set back from the road with a hand-painted sign she couldn't read from here. She was looking at her phone, calculating, when she heard the crunch of gravel and looked up. The man was walking toward her from a truck parked 50 yards back, an older Ford F-150, dark green, with a rusted passenger side door that had been repainted a slightly different shade. He was perhaps 40, lean, with the kind of face that had been weathered rather than aged. He wore a canvas work jacket over a dark sweater, and his hands were already reaching for the pockets as he walked. The unconscious gesture of someone who carries tools and knows where everything is. Beside him, a girl of about 8, dark-haired, wearing a yellow coat that was too big for her, held his hand with both of hers and took 2 steps for every one of his. "Car trouble?" he said. Not the way people say it when they're making conversation. The way a doctor might say, "Does it hurt here?" A direct, diagnostic question. "It's being handled," Elena said. He looked at the Ferrari. Then at her. Then back at the Ferrari. And something happened in his expression that she couldn't immediately name, a kind of careful attention. Like recognition. "Ferrari 458, he said. 2011 or 2012. Launsenling Isherar. Italia or Spider. Italia." She paused, despite herself. "How can you tell from here?" "Stance," he said. "Spider sits a little higher at the rear. Also the color. This specific red, it's not in the standard palette. Someone special ordered it." Elena said nothing. "I'm Marcus," he said. "This is Lily." He looked down at the girl, who looked up at Elena with the frank, unhurried curiosity of a child who has not yet learned that staring is impolite. "We were heading back from the feed store. I've got some tools in the truck. The dealership is sending someone." "How long?" She didn't answer. "An hour and a half," he said. It wasn't a guess. He'd heard the call, or heard enough of it, or simply understood that if she were willing to stand in the cold next to a dead car, she would have already solved the problem. "I'll take a look. It's up to you." Lily had released his hand and crouched down to look at a crack in the asphalt where something, a weed, improbably was growing. She did not appear to be paying attention to the conversation, but when Elena glanced at her, she looked up and said, very seriously, "Osua se ret gyoi." Then, with the practiced ease of a child who moves between worlds. "He's really good at cars." Elena looked at the man. "Fine," she said. "But don't touch anything you're not sure about." He didn't respond to the qualifier. He walked back to the truck and returned with a canvas bag that looked like it had been in continuous use for 20 years. He set it on the gravel, crouched beside the driver's door, and said, "Can you pop the hood?" She did. What happened next was not what she expected. She had seen mechanics work before the hurried confidence of dealership technicians with their laptops and their diagnostic ports. The efficient boredom of men who did the same job 40 times a week. Marcus did none of that. He stood at the front of the open engine bay and looked. Just looked. For almost a full minute, without moving, without touching anything, with an expression of complete stillness. Then he placed one hand flat on the intake manifold and closed his eyes. Lily had found a piece of chalk from somewhere. Elena had no idea where, and was drawing on the flat face of a nearby concrete barrier. A horse, it appeared to be. Or possibly a large dog. "The fuel pressure regulator," Marcus said. Eyes still closed. "But that's not the root problem. There's vapor lock in the return line. Someone changed the fuel filter within the last 6 months and didn't purge the line properly afterward." Elena said, "The dealership serviced it in August. That explains it." He opened his eyes and looked at her. "This is a 2-hour fix. Maybe less. If the fittings cooperate. And if they don't, then 2.5. He worked without narrating. That was the first thing she noticed. Watching from a careful distance, he did not explain what he was doing, or ask for her approval between steps. He worked the way people work when they have done something so many times that the process has become internal. A conversation between themselves and the object, rather than a performance for an audience. His tools were old, not vintage, just used. A set of combination wrenches, with the chrome worn from the handles. Pliers that had been repaired at the joint, with a welded bead of metal. A flashlight with the rubber grip partially peeled away. Everything organized in the canvas bag, with a precision that suggested long habit. Lily finished her drawing, and came to stand near Elena. Not beside her exactly, but in her general vicinity. She looked up at Elena with those clear, assessing eyes. "Do you own that car?" she asked. "Yes. It's very red." "It is. My dad says red cars are either for people who love cars, or for people who want to look like they love cars." She considered this. "Which one are you?" Elena looked at the car. In the late afternoon light, the red had deepened to something almost burgundy, and the lines of the body were doing that thing they did sometimes in the right conditions, looking less like a manufactured object and more like something alive. "I inherited it," she said, and was surprised to hear herself say it. Lily nodded, as if this were a complete answer. At 6:19, 1 hour and 32 minutes after Marcus had first opened the hood, the engine turned over. The sound was immediate and full. A deep mechanical thrum that Elena had heard 10,000 times, and yet which, in this moment, on this road, in the cold, sounded different. More present, more earnest. Marcus closed the hood. He wiped his hands on a gray rag from his back pocket. "It'll drive normally now," he said. "Better than before, actually. There was some carbon buildup I cleared out while I had access." Elena opened her purse. "How much?" she said. Marcus shook his head. "I don't," she started. "It's not a professional job," he said. "I'm not insured for roadside. It's just one person helping another person." He said it without weight, without magnanimity, as if it were simply a description of facts. "That's..." She stopped. She had been about to say ridiculous. She didn't say it. "I don't accept charity." Something moved across his face, not quite a smile. More like the recognition of a familiar argument. "It's not charity. Charity implies sacrifice. This cost me an hour and a half of driving back from the feed store. I would have been home by 6 either way." Lily tugged his sleeve. "Can we go? I'm hungry." "We can go," he said. Elena watched them walk back to the green truck. Lily climbed in on the driver's side and crawled across to the passenger seat. Marcus started the engine. It needed a moment. The Ford. A brief hesitation before it caught and pulled back onto Route 2 heading north. Elena stood beside the Ferrari. The meeting, she realized, was in 38 minutes. She got in and drove south. She made the meeting. Barely. She arrived at the hotel 9 minutes before 7, with her jacket still on, and her hair disheveled from the wind. And Thomas Harrington, early 50s, Dartmouth, the kind of deliberate handshake that announces itself, looked at her with the particular expression of a man who is deciding whether to be offended. She sat down and closed the contract in 41 minutes. Afterward, in her car, she should have felt the thing she usually felt. The clean, cool satisfaction of a completed task. Like a door clicking shut, she felt instead something mildly unfamiliar. A kind of residue she couldn't identify. She drove home on the freeway this time. She did not take Route 2. In her garage, a 3-car space beneath her house in Brentwood, climate-controlled, with lighting she'd installed specifically for looking at the Ferrari, she parked and sat and looked at the car through the windshield of her Range Rover for a longer time than she intended. The Ferrari had belonged to her father. His name had been Robert Hartwell, and he had been a mechanical engineer of the obsessive, particular variety, the kind of man who built things with his hands, not because he lacked the money to pay others, but because he could not trust anyone else to understand what he was building. He had worked for 3 years at Apex Dynamics, a small but well-funded advanced engineering firm in Pasadena, before leaving under circumstances that Elena had never fully understood. She had been 16 when he left. Not left the firm, left. Drove to work one morning in October, parked his car, and never came home. The police had found no evidence of foul play. His accounts had not been touched. His passport had not been used. He had simply a word Elena had come to resent vanished. The Ferrari had been left in the garage. She had driven it for the first time at 19. After getting her license, and her mother had cried watching her pull out of the driveway. Not from sentiment, but from fear, because the car was worth more than their house at that point. Elena had sold the house 3 years later to pay for her MBA and her mother's care home, but she had kept the Ferrari. She had never been entirely sure why. Now she got out of the Range Rover and walked around the Ferrari in her heels, slowly, as if looking for something she'd dropped. The engine ran smoother now. She had noticed it on the drive home, a responsiveness she had not been aware of missing until it was restored, as if the car had been speaking with a slight impediment and had only just been understood. Someone changed the fuel filter within the last 6 months and didn't purge the line properly. The dealership in August. She had authorized a standard service oil, filters, brakes, the usual. She had not asked about purging fuel lines. She had not known to ask. Marcus had known from 15 feet away. She went inside and opened her laptop and typed Ferrari 458 Italia fuel vapor lock return line into a search engine, and spent an hour reading. What she found confirmed everything he had said, with a precision that suggested he had not guessed, but known not estimated, diagnosed. She read 3 more articles about the 458's fuel system and understood, by the end of them, that she had been looking at an engine for 12 years without seeing it. She called her assistant at 9:30. "Diane," she said, "I need you to find someone for me." She drove the Ferrari for 5 days before she did anything about it. She took it to work twice. She drove up into the hills on a Saturday morning. The long curves above Mulholland. The kind of road the car was built for, and she felt the difference clearly enough that she stopped once to sit with it pulled over at a scenic overlook, with the engine idling, listening. She had owned this car for 17 years, and she had never described it as listening back. She was describing it that way now, internally, without meaning to. A colleague, Dennis, who worked in her building and drove a vintage Porsche 911, saw the Ferrari in the parking structure and made his usual appreciative noises, and then stopped. "Did you tune it?" he said. "Service in August." "No. That's not. It sounds different." He walked around the front. Lower. More even. Like someone corrected the balance. He frowned. "Who did the work?" "A man I met on Route 2. Dennis looked at her. You let a roadside guy work on your Ferrari. He fixed it in an hour and a half without diagnostic software. Dennis was quiet for a moment. What's his name? Marcus. She paused. I'm looking into it. Diane had found him by then, not easily. There was no shop listing under his name. No professional directory entry. What she found was a business registration from 4 years earlier. Whitfield Restoration. Sole proprietor, Marcus T. Whitfield, registered at an address in Reseda. There was a single review on a home improvement platform from 18 months ago that said only, he fixed something 3 other mechanics said was unfixable. I won't say more because I don't want anyone else to know about him. That review had been written by a man named Gerald Foss, and when Elena's investigator called him, Gerald Foss laughed and said he'd been waiting for someone to ask. He fixed a 1967 Lamborghini Miura that 2 Italian specialists had given up on, Foss said. Took him 4 days. Charged me $400. 400, Elena repeated. He argued about whether to charge me at all. His daughter was with him the whole time. She was doing homework on a folding table in the corner. Elena drove to Reseda on a Tuesday morning. The address was a residential street with a mix of small houses and 2-car garages. Marcus's property was unremarkable from the outside, a pale yellow house with a large detached garage at the end of a concrete driveway. The garage door was up. Inside, she could see 2 vehicles, a partially disassembled BMW from the early 80s and something older, possibly a Triumph, that she couldn't fully identify. She parked the Ferrari on the street. Lily saw her first. The girl was sitting on the front step with a library book open on her knees. And when Elena walked up the driveway, she looked up and said, "You came back. Is your father here?" "In the garage." She dog-eared her page. "He said you might come." Elena stopped. "He said that?" "He said, someone might come about the car. I figured it was you because you were the only person he helped recently." She stood up and looked at Elena with frank assessment. "You're wearing different shoes than before. These are better for walking." Elena looked down at her flats, then at Lily. "Will you take me to him?" she said. Lily led her into the garage. Marcus was under the BMW, on a rolling board, visible only from the waist down. The garage was clean in the way a working space is clean, organized rather than sterile. Everything in a defined place. The floor swept, though not mopped. The smell of penetrating oil and dry metal. "Miss Hartwell," he said, without emerging. "How did you know my name?" "Ferrari Italia, in that specific custom red," he said. "I had some time to look into it. Previous registered owner was Robert Hartwell, deceased or presumed. You're his daughter." He rolled out from under the BMW and stood up. He was wiping his hands on the same gray rag as before. "I need you to look at the car again," Elena said. "Why?" She hadn't expected the direct question. She had expected the acquiescence of a service professional. The reflexive, of course, what seems to be the problem. She found herself saying the true thing, which surprised her. "Because you saw something in it that I didn't." Marcus looked at her steadily. Lily, in the doorway, said, "Bo." He looked at his daughter. "All right," he said. "Drive it in." He worked differently this time. More slowly, more deliberately. With the manner of someone who is not so much repairing a thing as reading one. Elena stood to the side and watched. She had brought coffee 2 cups. From the place 3 blocks over that she'd spotted on the drive-in, and she placed one on the workbench near him without comment. He didn't acknowledge it for 20 minutes and then drank it without looking up. Lily sat at a folding table in the corner working through what appeared to be a math worksheet with the focused indifference of a child who has made peace with homework. "The frame welds," Marcus said, half to himself. Here and here he indicated 2 points near the firewall. "These aren't factory." Someone added reinforcement. "Custom work, good quality." Whoever did it knew what they were doing. Could it have been a repair? Elena asked. Not a repair. There was no corresponding damage. These were additions. He moved to the interior and removed the lower dashboard panel with practiced efficiency. And in here, he stopped. Elena moved closer. In the space behind the removed panel, where there should have been only the standard tangle of wiring harnesses and climate control cables, There was something additional, a small assembly mounted to the firewall, perhaps 8 inches square, made of what appeared to be brushed aluminum. It was neatly integrated, not jammed in, not taped, but properly bracketed, as if it had been installed during original assembly. "That's not stock," Elena said. "No. What is it?" Marcus reached in and traced the edges without touching the device itself. "I don't know yet," he said. "But it was installed by someone who understood this car's architecture well enough to integrate it invisibly. This isn't amateur work. Whoever did this spent time with engineering drawings." Elena sat down on a work stool that Lily had silently placed behind her at some point. "The car was my father's," she said. "I know. He was a mechanical engineer. He worked at Apex Dynamics in Pasadena. He disappeared when I was 16 in 2004. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He was still looking at the assembly. "Did he work on this car himself?" he asked. "I don't know. He always serviced it at the dealership." But she stopped. "He used to say things about it. When I was a child, he called it the Keeper. I thought it was just a name, something he said because he liked it." Marcus finally looked at her. "I need to open this," he said. "It's not a simple bracket removal. There's a mechanism, a locking system. If I force it, I could damage what's inside." "What do you think is inside?" "Something your father wanted to protect," he said. "And something he wanted someone to eventually find. He spent 3 days studying the mechanism before he touched it." Elena knew this because she came back both subsequent days, which she had not planned. She had meetings rescheduled, and a quarterly review to prepare for, and a call with her legal team about a subsidiary restructuring. And she came back anyway, for reasons she did not fully examine, parking the Range Rover down the street and walking up the driveway past Lily's rotation of outdoor activities, reading, drawing, a brief and serious phase with a jump rope, and into the garage where Marcus was measuring, photographing, sketching on graph paper with a mechanical pencil. He spoke to her differently now. Less formally, more directly, as if some social calculation had been silently completed and set aside. He explained what he was doing without being asked. He asked questions about her father, about the timeline of the car's history, about what she knew of the work Robert Hartwell had done at Apex Dynamics. She told him more than she'd told anyone in years. Apex Dynamics worked on advanced drivetrain systems, she said. On the second day, sitting on her usual stool with a coffee that Lily had made improbably competent at this, for an 8-year-old. "My father's specialty was what he called embedded mechanical logic. Ways of integrating information, carrying structures into physical systems." He said. She paused. "He said that a good machine should be able to tell its own story, if you knew how to read it." Marcus put down his pencil. "Embedded mechanical logic," he said, as if tasting the phrase. "I didn't understand what it meant when I was a child. I think I do," he said. "And I think I know what's in this car." On the morning of the 4th day, he called her at 7:15 and said, "Come this morning. Bring coffee." She was there by 8. He opened it without tools. That was the thing she would remember afterward. Not the contents, not the revelation, but the manner of the opening. He had spent 3 days understanding the locking mechanism, and in the end he opened it with 2 fingers and a quarter-turn rotation, the way a safe opens when you finally know the combination. No force, no drama, just understanding applied. The compartment was small, perhaps 6 inches by 4, recessed into the assembly. Inside, cushioned in a material that looked like high-density foam, cut to exact dimensions, was a flat piece of brushed steel, approximately 4 inches by 3, perhaps 2 millimeters thick. Marcus lifted it carefully and held it under the work light. Elena stood beside him. On one side of the steel piece, etched with what appeared to be a jeweler's tool, fine, precise, clearly done by hand, was a grid of symbols, technical notation, tolerances, material specifications, what appeared to be a 3-part reference number. The work was meticulous. Whoever had done it had taken their time. On the other side, in the bottom right corner, 3 words and a date. ERH, der 14. November 2003. Robert Hartwell, November and Part Bless, 2003. 11 months before he disappeared. Elena was not aware of sitting down. She was aware, in a distant way, that she was sitting on the concrete floor of Marcus's garage, and that Marcus had not said anything, and that somewhere outside Lily was singing to herself a fragment of something tuneless and inventive, the way children sing when they think no one is listening. She held the piece of steel in both hands. The etching caught the light in small, bright lines. Her father had been here. Not here, in this garage, but here, in this moment. In the intention of it, the deliberate creation of a hidden record, the trust that someone would eventually have the patience and the knowledge to find it. It doesn't just store what happened, she thought, and recognized the thought as her father's. It stores who we were when we made it. Marcus crouched down to her level, not beside her, in front of her, where she could see his face. "Are you all right?" he asked. She looked at him. "He made this," she said. "Yes. He put it there. Yes. And then he—" She stopped. She was not going to cry. She had not cried in 4 years, and she was not going to cry on the floor of a garage in Reseda in November. He disappeared 10 months later. "I know," Marcus said. She looked back at the steel piece. The reference numbers in the grid, she recognized the format now, partly, not from her own work, but from documents she'd seen years ago, when she'd gone through her father's files after the estate was settled. The numbering convention was Apex Dynamics's internal system. "This is from his work," she said. "This is documentation from his work at Apex." "I think so too. He hid it in the car, because—" She paused. "Because the car would be safe. Because I would keep the car." A long pause. "He knew I would keep it." Marcus said nothing. He let the silence do what silence was for. She scanned the steel piece. She hired a technical translator, someone who worked in patent forensics, and knew Apex Dynamics's internal notation system from 2 litigation cases in the mid-2000s. His name was Bertrand Sloan. He charged $300 an hour, and he called her at 10:30 on a Thursday morning. "This is a materials specification and test protocol for something called Project Meridian," Sloan said. "Filed internally in November 2003. It describes a novel composite material, something to do with thermal stress distribution in high-performance drivetrain components. The engineering here is a pause. Well, it's unusually elegant. Whoever designed this understood materials science at a level that most industrial engineers don't." "What happened to Project Meridian?" Elena asked. "As far as public record goes," Sloan said, "it doesn't exist. I've done patent searches and I can't find a filing. The techniques described in this notation, or techniques that appear substantially similar, show up in 3 Apex Dynamics patents filed between 2006 and 2008, but there's no attribution to Robert Hartwell. And no record of him as a co-inventor." Elena sat with her phone in her hand for a long time after she hung up. She thought about what she knew about Apex Dynamics. She had not thought about them carefully. In years they existed in the background of her father's disappearance, like a piece of furniture, permanent and unremarkable. She had always assumed his departure from the firm 2 years before his disappearance had been voluntary, or at worst, contentious in the ordinary way. Such things were disagreements about credit, compensation, direction. She now thought it might have been something else. She called Marcus. "I need you to look at something else," she said. "Not in the car. In some documents." "I'm a mechanic," he said. "You're something else," she said, "and you know it." A pause. "Come at 3, he said. "Lily's at school until 4. She brought the Apex Dynamics files. She had kept them in a storage unit in Culver City for 11 years. 3 boxes of paper and 4 hard drives she'd never been able to bring herself to look at comprehensively. She'd had them digitized 2 years ago by a document service, and the scanned files sat in a folder on her company server that she had opened twice. She opened them now, with Marcus at the folding table in the garage, while the Triumph project sat half-assembled in the corner, and the late afternoon light came in at low angles through the garage door. Marcus was not a financial analyst. He had no background in corporate documents or patent litigation, but he had, Elena came to understand, over the course of 3 hours, an unusually structured way of thinking, the habit of a man who diagnosed complex systems by understanding how their components related to each other. He saw patterns in the documents, the way he'd heard patterns in her engine. "Look at this," he said, at one point, sliding a page toward her. "The dates on these project status reports your father signed off on Phase 2 of Meridian in September 2003. Then in December 2003, a different project code appears in the budget allocation MRX, not Meridian. Your father's name is not on any MRX document." "MRX," Elena said. The patents filed in 2006 have the MRX designation in their internal reference codes," Marcus said. "Which means someone renamed the project after your father left. Or was removed." She looked at the signature on the Phase 2 report. Her father's handwriting, compact and careful, the R and H of his initials forming a shape she had seen on birthday cards and grocery lists, and she now understood on a small piece of steel hidden in a Ferrari engine. He had known something was wrong. He had known before he disappeared. He had hidden the original specifications, the proof of authorship in the car he knew would be kept. The man who had ultimately benefited from Project Meridian's derivative patents, who had been at Apex Dynamics during the relevant period and had risen steadily in the years following, was named Carlton Webb. He was now the chief financial officer of Prism Technologies, a publicly traded company that had licensed substantial elements of its thermal materials technology from Apex Dynamics. Prism Technologies was, Elena noted with a slow, cold recognition, one of the subsidiaries in a portfolio company that had recently been in acquisition talks with her own firm. She had been scheduled to meet with Prism's CFO in 6 weeks. With Carlton Webb, she sat back in her chair. "This is not a coincidence," she said. "No," Marcus agreed. "He's been near my firm before. 2 years ago, there was a consulting engagement." She stopped. "He would have had access to information about my position, about what I owned. He might have known about the car," Marcus said. "He might have been looking for it." Elena thought about the past 2 years. The acquisition inquiry that had come through an unusual channel. The consulting firm that had shown particular interest in her personal holdings as part of due diligence. The service appointment in August standard dealership service. She'd booked it through a concierge program she subscribed to. She called Diane at 8:30 that night. "The August service," she said. "The concierge booking. Who made the appointment?" Diane was quiet for a moment. "The appointment came through the Platinum Care platform. You authorized it in July." "I know I authorized it." "Who scheduled it? What's the name on the service order?" A longer pause. "Typing." "The service advisor was listed as Regis Automotive Group. But the scheduling contact, the person who coordinated the pickup and drop-off." A pause. "The name on file is Carlton Webb." Elena stood in her kitchen, very still. Her father's car had been in Carlton Webb's orbit in August. Someone had serviced it, had looked inside, had perhaps found nothing because the compartment was, as Marcus had demonstrated, extraordinarily well concealed, but someone had tried. She did not go to the police first. She went to Bertrand Sloan, the patent forensics expert, and she asked him what was needed to prove prior inventorship in a disputed patent claim filed 20 years ago. "Contemporaneous documentation with original signatures," he said. "Technical specifications in the inventor's own notation, dated before the patent filing. Ideally, something that can be forensically dated material analysis on the substrate." "I have a metal plate," Elena said. "Steel, hand-etched. Dated November 2003. Sloan was quiet for a moment. "Engraving can be forensically dated within a few years," he said. "Steel composition can be traced to manufacturing batches. If the plate is genuine, it is, then you have something," he said. "Depending on what the specifications describe, you could have the basis for a patent invalidity claim, which in turn, if the patents were licensed for commercial use, becomes a significant financial matter." "How significant?" He named a number. Elena called Marcus. "I need one more thing from you," she said. "What?" I need you to testify. About what you found. About how you found it. And where it was. And what condition it was in. I need a technical witness who can explain to a court or to a board what those specifications mean and how they relate to what's in the car. A pause. I'm a mechanic, he said. You keep saying that, Elena said. And it keeps being true the way a partial truth is true. What else are you? A longer pause. I went to Caltech, he said. Mechanical engineering. Class of 2005. I left before my dissertation. He paused. My wife was ill. I came back to California. I needed work I could do near home, with flexible hours, Elena said. And when she died, the silence on the line was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of a fact that had been absorbed rather than avoided. By then, he said, I'd been doing this for 3 years, and I was good at it. And Lily was 4. He paused. I didn't go back. Will you testify? Another pause. Tell me the date of the meeting, he said. She told him. Lily's winter break starts the week before, he said. I'll need to find someone to watch her. I know someone, Elena said, which surprised her as she said it. My assistant Diane has a daughter Lily's age. They can stay at my house. There's a pool. A very long pause. All right, he said. The meeting with Prism Technologies board was 3 weeks later. Elena had used the intervening time well. Sloan had produced a 40-page technical analysis. Her legal team had filed a preliminary challenge to 2 of the 3 Apex-derived patents. The forensic dating of the steel plate had come back with a probability range of 1,999, 2007, consistent with the November 2003 date, with the steel composition matching a batch produced by a California mill that had ceased operations in 2006. Carlton Webb arrived at the meeting with his own lawyers, which told Elena he had known something was coming. He was a compact man in his late 50s, with the particular stillness of someone who has been careful for a long time, and when he looked at Elena across the conference table, his expression was measured in the way expensive things are measured by weight rather than volume. Marcus sat to Elena's right. He was wearing a dark jacket over a clean shirt, his hands flat on the table, and he looked precisely as calm as he looked when he was listening to an engine. He was going to be fine. Elena opened the folder. My father, she said, was Robert Hartwell. He was the primary architect of the thermal materials process you've been licensing under the Apex patents for the past 17 years. He documented his original specifications in November 2003 and concealed them in a vehicle he knew would be preserved. We have the documentation, we have forensic dating, and we have a technical witness who can explain every element of the comparison between my father's specifications and your licensed material. She slid 3 pages across the table. I'm not here to litigate, she said. I'm here to correct the record. My father's name will be restored as co-inventor on the relevant patents, with appropriate compensation structured from the commercial licensing revenue to date. Alternatively, we proceed with the invalidity challenge, which will trigger the licensing review provisions in your agreements with 6 downstream companies, which I believe your legal team understands would be a considerably more disruptive process. Webb looked at the pages. He looked at Marcus. He looked at Elena. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he said, Who was driving when the car broke down? Elena did not understand the question. On Route 2, he said. 3 weeks ago. We had a team monitoring the vehicle. We saw it stop. We saw the mechanic. He looked at Marcus. We didn't know who you were. Just a man on the road, Marcus said. Webb looked back at Elena. His expression was the expression of someone calculating a very large number. I'll need to speak with my legal team, he said. You have until Thursday, Elena said. They settled on Wednesday. The terms were specific. Robert Hartwell's name would be added to the 3 patents as co-inventor, contingent on no disclosure of Apex's original role in the suppression of his authorship. A condition Elena's lawyers negotiated down to a brief and carefully worded public statement, acknowledging previously overlooked attribution A financial settlement was structured. Elena's firm received it in trust for a foundation she established in her father's name, directed toward engineering education programs at underfunded schools in the Los Angeles area. She drove to Reseda on a Thursday afternoon in early December. The garage door was up. Marcus was working on the Triumph. It was further along now, the engine reassembled, the frame straightened and primed. He didn't hear her pull up. He was under the car. Lily was on the front step with a different library book. She had gone through approximately one per week since Elena had started coming here. Elena had noticed. She was currently working through a collection of short stories that looked significantly above grade level. "He's under the Triumph," Lily said, without looking up. "I see that." Elena sat on the step beside her. "What are you reading?" Lily held up the cover. "Oh, Henry, Complete Stories." "He's good," Elena said. "The endings are funny," Lily said. "Not, haha, funny. More like the other kind. Ironic." "Yeah." She turned a page. "Are you going to give my dad a lot of money?" Elena considered this. "I'm going to try," she said. "He'll say no." "I know. He always says no. Mr. Foss tried to pay him extra, and he said no." She looked up. "He says the job is the payment." "I know he says that. Do you understand it?" Lily asked, with the genuine curiosity of someone for whom understanding was more interesting than agreement. Elena was quiet for a moment. "I'm starting to," she said. Marcus rolled out from under the Triumph. He saw Elena and stood up without apparent surprise. He accepted the coffee she'd brought with both hands and drank it. "It's done?" he said. "It's done." She handed him the folder. "Settlement documents. Your name is included technical consultant. There's a fee attached." He opened the folder. He looked at the number. He closed the folder. "No," he said. "Marcus, I found something in a car," he said. "That's what I do. I don't..." He paused. "I don't accept payment for being in the right place." "It's not payment for being in the right place," Elena said. "It's payment for 3 years ago and 7 years ago. And every car you fixed for $400 when it should have been $4,000. It's..." She stopped. She tried a different approach. "My father hid that documentation because he thought someone who understood it would eventually find it. You found it. You're owed something." "I have what I need," Marcus said. "Lily needs things," Elena said. Marcus looked at his daughter. "She does," he agreed, "but not." "There's a good school in Pasadena," Elena said. "A science and engineering program. They have a partial scholarship fund for students who qualify. Lily would qualify. The foundation I'm establishing will be a donor." She paused. "That's separate from what's in the folder. That's already done." Marcus looked at her. Something moved in his expression, not the resistance she had expected, but something more complicated, a kind of reckoning. "You didn't ask me," he said. "No," she agreed. "I didn't." A long silence. "Thank you," he said. The words were plain and unembellished, which made them exact. She nodded. Lily sat in the Ferrari that afternoon for approximately 45 minutes. She had asked first very correctly, with the particular formality of a child who has been taught that other people's things are other people's things, and Elena had opened the passenger door, and she had climbed in and sat with her hands in her lap looking at the dashboard with an expression of complete absorption. Elena and Marcus stood in the garage doorway. "She's interested in engines," Marcus said. "I noticed. She's been reading my old Caltech textbooks. The undergraduate ones." He paused. "She's 8. She's going to be remarkable," Elena said. Marcus said nothing, which was the particular agreement of a parent who believes the thing but has learned not to say it too often. Because to say it is to tempt the universe. The afternoon light had gone flat and pale. The winter light of a December day in Southern California that is not cold enough to be dramatic, but carries a certain gravity, a certain leaning toward dusk. The Ferrari sat in the middle of the concrete floor, its red deep and steady in that light. Elena looked at it. She thought about her father's hands, the shape of them, remembered from childhood, the calluses from the work he did on weekends in the garage of their house in Altadena, the patience with which he'd explained things, The way he'd said the car has memory, and the way she had not understood what he meant until now, until this moment, standing in a stranger's garage that was no longer entirely a stranger's. The car had kept it. 20 years, 3 owners mechanics. A dealership in August that had looked and not seen, and the car had kept it. Because he had built the keeping into the car, because he had trusted not in luck, not in circumstance, but in the eventual arrival of the right kind of attention. What will you do with it? Marcus asked. The car. She had thought about this. Keep it, she said. Drive it. Good. But I want to understand it now, she said. Really understand it. The way you do. She paused. Will you teach me? He looked at her sideways, not quite a smile, closer to the expression he'd had the first time she'd offered him money. The expression of someone deciding whether to take a thing seriously. That's a long project, he said. I have time, she said. Lily climbed out of the Ferrari and stood beside it with her hands on the roof, looking in through the windshield at the dashboard. She said something to the car. Elena couldn't hear it, some private remark, and then patted the roof once and walked back toward them. It's very clean inside, she said to Elena, which was clearly the highest praise she could offer. Like someone took care of it. Someone did, Elena said. For a long time, Lily looked at the car once more, then at Elena, then at her father, with the synthesizing gaze of a child who is placing things in relation to each other. Okay, she said, which settled it, in the way that children's pronouncements sometimes settle things not through authority but through simplicity. Marcus went back to the Triumph. Elena sat on the workstool she had come to think of as hers and watched him work. Outside, the December light continued its slow recession. The valley beyond the garage door went from pale gold to gray to a particular deep blue that was not quite dark and not quite light, the color of a moment just before resolution, before the last variable in a long equation finally comes clear. The engine of the Triumph fired for the first time at 6:14. Not perfectly, it coughed once and roughened, the idle hunting, but it fired. Marcus stood and listened with his hand flat on the vibrating metal, eyes closed, the posture she now recognized. He nodded once, a private confirmation. The engine settled. Elena drove home on Route 2.
They laughed when Ethan Cole handed over his last $100 for a rusted, barely running car that looked like it belonged in a scrapyard. The dealer smirked. The man behind him snorted loud enough to turn heads. A woman in a yellow vest covered her mouth and said something to the person beside her. Her words carried, "Can you believe that?" Ethan didn't react. He just crouched down beside the hood, studied the front grille for a moment longer than anyone expected, and stood back up. His daughter, Lily, was 6 years old and standing 3 feet away, holding the strap of her backpack with both hands. She had her father's quiet in her. She didn't flinch. She just looked at the people laughing, then looked back at her dad. She reached out and took his hand. 3 days later, a convoy of black SUVs rolled slowly down their street. A man stepped out, older, pale under the afternoon sun. He was holding a photograph, and his hands weren't entirely steady. He looked at the car sitting in the driveway. He looked at the photograph, then he looked up. Nobody laughed. Ethan Cole woke at 5:15 every morning without an alarm. He'd done it for 11 years since his first shift at Precision Motor Works, where they docked pay if you arrived after 5:30. He'd left that job 9 years ago. The habit stayed. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling of the small bedroom. The paint near the window was peeling in one corner. He'd meant to fix it before winter. That was 2 winters ago. He got up quietly, pulled on a gray t-shirt and work pants, and went to check on Lily. She was asleep on her side, one arm around a stuffed elephant named Gerald. Gerald had lost an eye somewhere around Lily's 4th birthday, and she had refused every replacement Ethan offered. He just sees with his heart now, Daddy. He hadn't argued. He stood in her doorway for a few seconds, then went to the kitchen. The garage sat off the back of the house, connected by a side door that groaned when it opened. Ethan had learned to open it slowly. He'd also learned to avoid the 3rd floorboard in the hall, the burner on the left side of the stove that ran hot, and every other quiet compromise that came with renting a house built in 1973. The garage itself was small room for one vehicle and a workbench along the left wall. Tools hung on pegboard, organized by size. Not obsessively, just practically. A man who can't find his tools wastes time, And time was the one thing Ethan had learned not to waste. He had a 2004 pickup truck he'd rebuilt from a salvage auction 3 years ago. It ran. That was about the most generous thing you could say about it. The heater worked in patches, the passenger window didn't roll down all the way. But it moved, and it passed inspection. And it got Lily to school and Ethan to the 3 houses he serviced on rotating contract oil changes. Brake jobs, basic maintenance for people who didn't want to pay dealer rates. It was a living. Barely, after his wife, Sandra, died leukemia, 27 months from diagnosis to end. Ethan had scaled back. He'd been working for a regional fleet maintenance company, decent salary, benefits, weekends mostly free. After she was gone, he couldn't do the hours anymore. Lily needed someone. He became that someone. He didn't talk about Sandra much. Not because it hurt, though it did, but because some things didn't need to be turned into words to be true. He kept her photo on the mantle in the living room, a small one, in a plain frame. She was laughing in it, head tilted back. He had taken the picture at a county fair the summer before the diagnosis. Some mornings, walking past it, he'd pause for just a second, then he'd keep moving. The contract work paid the rent and not much more. The truck nickeled him every few months. He'd racked up a small debt to his landlord back rent from the month after Sandra's last round of treatment wiped out their savings, and a slightly larger one on a credit card he used only for Lily's school supplies and the rare emergency. He wasn't drowning. He was paddling. There's a difference, though from the outside it can look the same. Lily knew more than he thought she did. Kids that age absorb everything. She'd stopped asking for things at the store the way she used to. She'd started eating her dinners completely, even when it was just rice and whatever he could stretch with it. She'd told her first-grade teacher that her dad was very good at fixing things, which her teacher had relayed to Ethan at pickup with a small smile. He'd driven home quietly after that. Before the fleet job, before the marriage, before everything, Ethan had spent 4 years doing something else, something he didn't bring up at the school pickup line or mention when neighbors asked what he did. He'd worked in the historical preservation division of a specialty auction house. Specifically, he authenticated vintage and prototype automobiles. It was a strange job for a 23-year-old from rural Ohio. He'd fallen into it sideways, a mechanic's apprenticeship that connected to a collector who needed someone with hands and eyes and patience. Ethan had all three. He spent 4 years learning to read a vehicle the way a scholar reads a manuscript. The wear patterns, the assembly marks, the small deviations that separated a production model from something that had never been meant for any showroom. He left when the work started pulling him away for months at a time, when Sandra got serious, when the idea of a real life, a grounded one, with people who counted on him became more real than the work. He didn't regret leaving, but he never forgot what he'd learned. Some knowledge doesn't go away, it just waits. The notice appeared on a community board at the hardware store. County impound liquidation all vehicles as is Saturday 8 a.m. Ethan saw it on a Thursday morning when he was picking up brake fluid. He read it twice, then went home and looked at his bank balance. He had $112 until his next contract payment, due in 11 days. Rent was current. Lily's lunch account at school had 2 weeks left. The credit card had a small buffer, $100. That was the number he gave himself. He took Lily with him Saturday morning because his neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Helen, who watched Lily when necessary, had a doctor's appointment. Lily wore her purple rain jacket even though it wasn't raining. She decided it was her lucky jacket. The salvage lot was on the east side of the county, past the highway exchange. A flat gravel lot with maybe 40 vehicles arranged in rough rows. Half of them were obvious write-offs, crumpled, missing doors, stripped. A few were older trucks that might have life left in them. A crowd of about 30 people moved through the rows, some with clipboards, some with phones out taking pictures. The dealer running the event was a man named Dale Pruitt. Broad, sun-weathered, the kind of man who made small talk into a competitive sport. He had a folding table near the entrance with printed vehicle sheets and a cash box. Ethan walked the rows with Lily. He wasn't looking for anything in particular. He was looking with the kind of attention that doesn't have an agenda, just open, patient, taking things in. He'd been trained to look that way. You don't search for what you expect to find. You let what's there show itself. They were near the back of the lot when he stopped. The car was partially blocked by a crushed minivan. It took a moment to even identify it as a car. The rust was advanced, the body panels mottled with brown and dark gray, the original paint almost entirely gone. It sat low on flat tires. The windshield had a crack running from the lower left corner to the upper right like a signature. Most people had walked past it without stopping. A few had glanced and kept going. Ethan stopped. He looked at the front, then the side. Then he walked around the back slowly. There was something about the roofline, something about the way the rear quarter panels met the trunk. He had seen that shape before, not in person in documentation, in a photograph in a binder he'd studied during his second year at the auction house. "What is it?" Lily asked, looking up at the car. "I don't know yet," Ethan said, which was the truth. He crouched down beside the passenger door. The handle was gone. He looked through the cracked window at the dashboard. The instrumentation was wrong for what the body suggested. It wasn't wrong like damaged, wrong like different, modified, or original to a version that hadn't reached standard production. He stood up and walked to the front, leaned down and looked at the bottom edge of the grille. The badge was gone, no surprise there, those went missing quickly on abandoned vehicles. But there, just to the right of where the badge would have sat, was a small stamped mark in the metal. Not a VIN, something different. A production code. He had seen that kind of stamping once before. His breath came out slow and measured. Bo Cha Kung. Lily asked the Vietnamese habit Sandra had introduced early, the private language they kept between the three of them, now between two. "Are you sure, Daddy?" Ethan looked at the stamp one more time. He straightened up. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'm sure." He found Dale Pruitt at the table. "The brown one in the back," Ethan said. "The sedan with the cracked windshield. That thing?" Dale looked up. $100. "Take it or leave it. Honestly, I'd rather you leave it. Less paperwork for me." A few people nearby heard. Someone laughed. Ethan paid in cash. 520s. Word moved through the lot the way it does in small crowds, fast and slightly exaggerated by the time it arrived. By the time Ethan had the receipt in his hand, 6 or 7 people had drifted over to see what someone had actually paid money for. Dale Pruitt, energized by the audience, decided to perform. "Folks, we've got ourselves a buyer," he announced, gesturing toward the car. $100. For that, he waved at the rusted sedan the way a game show host reveals a bad prize. "Now I've sold some junk in my time." But, laughter. Genuine laughter from the crowd. A man in a John Deere cap shook his head and grinned. "What are you going to do with that? Put it in a garden?" More laughter. A younger guy raised his phone. "Hold on, I gotta get this." Lily was standing beside Ethan. She had pulled the hood of her purple jacket up. Her face was in shadow. Dale walked over to the car and patted the roof. Rust flaked off. He made a show of looking at his hand. "Sir, I want you to know, and I say this with respect, that this vehicle is worth approximately nothing. The engine's probably seized. The frame might be compromised. And I think something died in the back seat. What is it you're planning to do with this?" Ethan had the receipt folded in his shirt pocket. He looked at Dale for a moment without speaking. Then he looked at the car. "Drive it," he said. Bigger laughter. Dale spread his hands to the crowd like a circus announcer. "Drive it. He's going to drive it. Everyone." The man with the phone swept it back and forth across the scene, the laughing crowd. The rusted car. Ethan standing quietly beside it. Ethan glanced down at Lily. She had taken the hood of her jacket down. She was looking at the people laughing. Not with anger, she was 6. And there was something more complicated in her face than anger. Something that looked like she was deciding something about these people and filing it away. Then she looked up at her father. She slipped her hand into his. He squeezed once. "I'll need it towed," Ethan told Dale. His voice was even and clean, not angry, not embarrassed, just practical. Dale blinked, momentarily thrown by the lack of reaction. "Yeah, okay. We've got a guy." The tow truck arrived 40 minutes later. The operator, a quiet man named Ray, hooked up the sedan without comment. He had the expression of someone who'd towed things far stranger and had stopped having opinions. As the car was winched onto the flatbed, the man with the phone zoomed in. A couple of people watched with arms crossed, grinning. Lily watched too. Then she looked at her dad. "They don't see it," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Ethan picked her up. She was almost too big for this, but not quite yet. He settled her on his hip. "No," he said. "They don't." They rode home in the cab of the tow truck, the sedan behind them, and the whole county probably thinking they'd just watched the dumbest purchase in local history. The car sat in the driveway for the first afternoon because Ethan needed to think before he touched it. He stood at the end of the driveway with a cup of coffee, looking at it, not circling, not examining, just looking. Like you let your eyes settle on a painting before you read the placard. Lily brought him a peanut butter sandwich around noon because she'd decided he needed one. He ate it standing there. She sat on the porch steps and watched him. "Is it a mystery?" she asked, something like that. Do you know the answer? Part of it, he said. I have to make sure. He started that evening, after dinner, after Lily was in bed. He moved the car into the garage using the handbrake and a come-along winch. The engine wouldn't turn over. The transmission was locked. It took him 20 minutes to get it centered on the garage floor. He set up both work lights. He started with the exterior, but not for the reasons a restorer would. He wasn't looking for damage or assessing what needed replacement. He was reading the car's history through its surface. He cleaned in sections, working methodically from front to back. He used a mild solvent and a soft cloth, not because the surface needed gentle treatment, but because he needed to see. Aggressive cleaning would remove trace evidence. He had learned that in his second year at the auction house, from a man named Warren Hess, who had authenticated 7 pre-war prototypes over his career and never been wrong once. Clean it like you're trying not to wake someone up, Warren had told him. The rust was surface level in most places, serious in 2 spots along the lower sill, but not structural, not yet. The body panels were heavier gauge than a standard production vehicle of this vintage. That was unusual. He found the first manufacturing mark he was looking for on the driver's side door pillar, hidden behind where a weather-stripping gasket would have sat. It was a small raised numeral, not stamped, but cast into the metal. That was handmade tooling. You didn't do that on a production floor. He stopped. He photographed it with his phone, close-up, with a flashlight at a low angle to throw the relief into contrast. Then he moved to the engine bay. Getting it open took a pry bar and patience. The hood latch had been welded over strange, deliberate, purposeful. Someone had sealed this hood at some point and clearly hadn't expected anyone to open it again. When it finally came up, Ethan stood looking at the engine for a long time. The engine wasn't original to the body. That was immediately obvious. Different mounting configuration, different period. But what sat in the bay wasn't a replacement pulled from a junkyard either. It was too clean for that, even accounting for the years. It had been installed carefully, intentionally. And it was a variant. He recognized, a modified displacement version of an engine family he had spent 3 months studying during his 3rd year at the auction house, because they'd had a prototype come through with the same family tree. A development engine, not a production engine. His hands were very still. He spent another hour photographing the engine bay from every angle. Then he went inside, sat at the kitchen table, and opened his laptop. He knew better than to search directly. Public search histories were careless. Instead, he went to a private collector forum he'd registered on years ago and never posted in, a forum used mostly by serious authenticators and a few discreet major collectors. He searched the archive for a specific term, the internal project code he believed was connected to what was in his garage. He found 4 posts over a 14-year span. The last one was from 9 years ago. The thread had been started by someone asking whether a rumored prototype from the program had ever surfaced. The consensus was no, it had been assumed scrapped. Ethan sat back in his chair. He could be wrong. The probability was meaningful. The connection could be coincidental, borrowed parts, mismatched assembly, nothing more. But the casting marks didn't lie. And the roofline didn't lie. And in his experience, coincidences of this complexity didn't happen. They just looked like coincidences until you knew enough to see them clearly. He closed the laptop and went to bed. He lay in the dark for a while, listening to the house. Then he slept. The forum post appeared 3 days after he'd sent the photographs. He hadn't posted them publicly. He'd sent them privately to a single account, a username he recognized from the archival threads. Someone who demonstrated genuine technical knowledge over years of posts. Someone who had, 9 years ago, written 7 careful paragraphs about why the prototype program in question had likely produced at least 2 physical vehicles before it was shut down. The message came back at 11:40 at night, while Ethan was finishing a brake job on his neighbor's sedan in the garage. He wiped his hands on a shop rag and read it standing under the work light. I need you to tell me where you got these photographs. I'm not asking about the car itself. I'm asking about these specific photographs. The casting mark on the door pillar, the engine mount configuration. Do you understand what you're showing me? Ethan typed back, yes. The reply came in under 2 minutes. Then you know that if this is what it appears to be, it's the only surviving physical example of a development program that the company officially stated produced 0 drivable prototypes, which means either their records are wrong, or someone went to considerable trouble to make this car disappear from the record. I've been looking for evidence of this vehicle for 11 years. Please tell me it's real and not a fabrication. Ethan looked around the garage, at the car under the lights, at the open engine bay. At the casting mark he'd photographed 47 times from different angles to make sure the light was right. He typed, "It's real." The reply took longer this time, nearly 4 minutes. "Then you need to be very careful. Not because of anything dramatic, but because there are people who have been looking for this for a long time, and some of them have resources you don't. If you haven't told anyone, don't. Not yet. I need to make some calls." Ethan put the phone face down on the workbench. He looked at the car. He had a rough idea of what it was worth. Not a precise number. Authentication changed everything, and condition was a factor, and the legal history of the vehicle would matter, but a rough idea. The number was not small. It was, in fact, larger than anything Ethan had ever encountered directly in his life. Larger than the house he'd grown up in, larger than every wage he'd earned since he was 18, added together. He didn't feel elated. He felt the way he felt when a diagnosis finally came back clear, not happiness exactly, but the release of tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. A settling. He went inside and checked on Lily. She was asleep. Gerald, the one-eyed elephant, was on the floor beside the bed. Ethan picked him up and tucked him back under her arm. She didn't wake. He went to the kitchen and made tea he didn't particularly want, because he needed something to do with his hands. The car was real. That much he was certain of. The authentication would take time, weeks, possibly months, for a full chain of evidence to be established. There would be legal questions about provenance, about the original registration history, about the county impound process. But those were tomorrow's problems. Tonight, the only thing that mattered was this. He had looked at something everyone else had walked past, and he had seen it clearly. The video appeared the same weekend. He found it because a woman he knew vaguely, the mother of one of Lily's classmates, mentioned it at school pickup on Monday. She had a complicated expression. "There's this video going around of a guy at the county salvage lot. I think it might be you." It was him. 43 seconds. Ethan standing beside the rusted sedan while Dale Pruitt performed for the crowd. Laughter. The comment about something dying in the back seat. Ethan's flat, even response. "Drive it." More laughter. The camera panning to show Lily with her hood pulled up. The video had been shared widely in the county's general community page, and then beyond it picked up by a larger page that aggregated clips with the caption, "Man pays $100 for absolute junk at county lot." Some people never learn. The comments, which Ethan did not read past the first line before closing the page, were what you'd expect. Dale Pruitt called him on Wednesday. Ethan answered because he didn't recognize the number. "Listen, I heard you've been working on that car," Dale said. He'd lost some of the showmanship. His voice had a careful quality now. "I wanted to reach out, see if maybe you'd want to sell it back. Recoup your 100, maybe a little extra." Goodwill gesture. "I'm fine," Ethan said. "I could go a couple hundred. Straight cash. I'm not selling it." Silence. Then, "What are you planning to do with it?" "Restore it," Ethan said, which was partly true. Dale made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "All right, well, offer stands." Ethan hung up. On Thursday, he noticed a dark gray sedan parked on the street opposite his house. Different spot each time he looked, but always within sight of his driveway. He couldn't see the driver clearly. He mentioned it to no one. He didn't change his routine. He went to his contract jobs, a brake job on the far side of the county, an oil change for the retired couple on Mercer Road who always offered him lunch, and he came home, and he worked on documenting the car in the evenings, and he cooked dinner, and he put Lily to bed, and he sat at the kitchen table afterward in the quiet that follows a child's sleep. The sedan was sometimes there when he checked at 10, sometimes not. He told himself it was probably nothing. He half believed it. There was a strange doubling in those days, the ordinary life running on its ordinary track, and underneath it something else, something he could feel without naming. The weight of a secret that wasn't a secret yet, just a fact that hadn't been confirmed to anyone who mattered. He wasn't afraid. Fear would have required him to believe something bad was coming. He didn't believe that. He just believed something large was coming, and he had learned a long time ago that large things require patience. He took Lily to school. He came home. He documented. At the hardware store on Friday, he ran into a man he knew slightly, a neighbor from 2 streets over named Carl Whitmore, who worked at the county building office and had a habit of being in all the right places to pick up the wrong kind of information. "Heard you bought yourself a real prize at the salvage lot," Carl said, with the grin of someone who has heard something funny and is deciding whether to be kind about it. "I did," Ethan said. Carl waited for more. Nothing came. "You working on it?" Carl tried. "Yeah." Any luck getting it running? Ethan picked up the bolt he'd come in for a metric hex head he'd measured twice before leaving the house. Working on it, he said. Carl gave up. Well, good luck to you. Ethan paid and left. He took a photo of the license plate and sent it to the forum contact, whose name he'd learned by now was Preston Hale. Preston was a private automotive researcher based out of Oregon. He had no credentials that appeared in any public database, which Ethan had learned meant, in this world, that he was very good at what he did. Preston's reply was quick. Rental car registered to a holding company. Could be nothing. Could be a scout. Don't engage. Don't publicize. How's the documentation coming? Ethan had been photographing everything meticulously. Every casting mark, every manufacturing variance, every component that deviated from production specifications. He'd found two more. A steering column that matched a period prototype specification rather than a production one, and a reinforced floor pan design that appeared in no production model documentation he could locate. He'd also found something in the trunk. Under the interior carpeting, mostly disintegrated, was a thin metal plate, bolted to the trunk floor. The bolts had corroded solid, but the plate itself was intact. On it, barely legible under decades of oxidation, was an alphanumeric code stamped in a format he recognized from his time at the auction house. A manufacturer's internal vehicle identification. Not for the public record, for internal tracking only. He photographed it from every angle and sent the images to Preston. Preston took 6 hours to respond. That was the longest he'd ever gone without responding. When the reply came, it was 3 words. It's confirmed. Real. Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table when he read it. Lily was doing a drawing beside him, a horse, she'd said, though it had a number of legs that horses didn't typically have. He put the phone down. He looked at his daughter's drawing. She looked up. You okay, Daddy? Yeah, he said. You made a sound. Did I? Kind of a quiet sound. She studied him for a moment with serious eyes. A good quiet sound or a worried quiet sound? He thought about it. Good, he said. She seemed satisfied with that and went back to her horse. Preston Hale arrived in person 8 days later. He drove a plain white truck with Oregon plates and knocked on Ethan's door at 9 in the morning on a Tuesday, carrying a hard-sided case and a thermos of coffee. He was somewhere in his late 50s, lean, with close-cut gray hair and the careful hands of someone who'd spent decades handling things that mattered. He didn't say much at the door. Just, "Can I see it?" They spent 4 hours in the garage. Preston worked with the focused silence of someone who didn't perform expertise, who simply exercised it. He had brought his own instruments, a fiber optic scope, a spectrometer calibrated for metal alloy analysis, a digital micrometer. He measured the wall thickness of the door panels. He analyzed the alloy composition of the casting marks. He spent 40 minutes on the trunk plate alone. Lily brought them both sandwiches at noon without being asked. Preston thanked her gravely, which she appreciated. When he finished, Preston stood in the middle of the garage and looked at the car for a long time. "I've been in this field for 31 years, he said finally. "I've authenticated 42 significant vehicles. I've also rejected calls on another 60-something that turned out to be fakes or misattributions." He paused. "This is not a fake. This is not a misattribution." Ethan nodded slowly. The internal code on the trunk plate traces to a development program that ran for approximately 32 months before it was formally closed. Preston continued. The program officially produced 0 road-ready prototypes. The documentation submitted to close the program stated that all physical test units had been disassembled and scrapped. He looked at Ethan. "They weren't," Ethan said. "At least one wasn't." Preston looked back at the car, which means either the scrapping documentation was falsified, which would have required cooperation at a fairly high level, or this vehicle was removed from the program before the documentation was finalized by someone who had the access and the motive to do so. What would the motive be? Preston was quiet for a moment. This program was shut down because of a corporate acquisition. The acquiring company wanted the program terminated. There was a legal and contractual battle over the intellectual property. If someone inside the original company believed the program was worth preserving, believed the work mattered enough to save at least one physical example of it, they might have found a way to make one vehicle disappear into the private system, not to profit from it, just to preserve it. Ethan thought about that. "What's it worth?" he asked. Preston turned to look at him. There was something careful in his expression, the look of a man measuring how much a number could alter a person. At auction, with full authentication documentation and clear title, comparable historical prototypes of this significance have sold in the range of $2 to $3 million. This one, given the corporate history and the fact that it's the only surviving unit, could go higher. There would be collectors interested from 5 continents. Ethan stood very still. Clear title will require legal review of the impound chain, Preston added. But county impound liquidation has clean legal precedent for transfer of ownership. That shouldn't be an issue. He picked up his thermos. Mr. Cole, he said. May I ask how you spotted it? In that lot? In that condition? Ethan considered the question. The roofline, he said, and the stamp on the grill. I'd seen the documentation once, years ago. I didn't go looking for it. I just didn't walk past it when I saw it. Preston looked at him for a moment. Then he gave a small nod, the nod of one person acknowledging another's particular kind of knowledge. I need to make some calls, he said. There are people who should know this exists. The SUVs came on a Friday afternoon. There were 3 of them, dark, quiet, moving at a pace that suggested the occupants were in no hurry because they didn't need to be. They parked in a line on the street in front of Ethan's house. Lily was on the porch with a book when they pulled up. She watched them park with genuine interest and zero alarm at 6. 3 large black vehicles were simply interesting. The man who got out of the second vehicle was named William Carver. Ethan knew the name. Most people who'd spent any time in serious automotive history knew it. Carver had founded the development program in question decades ago, an independent engineering venture that had been acquired and ultimately shuttered in a corporate transaction that remained, in certain circles, a subject of ongoing frustration. He was 71 years old now. He had sold 3 successful companies after the acquisition, made a fortune in a way that had nothing to do with automobiles, and had apparently spent a portion of that fortune, over many years, trying to find what he had lost. He walked up the path with the measured steadiness of a man who had learned to economize his physical energy without losing his presence. He was pale, not ill, just the paleness of someone who spent most of their time indoors, in meetings, in offices, in the interiors of things. His hair was white and neatly kept. He wore a plain dark jacket over a blue shirt, no tie. He was holding a photograph. It was an old photograph, the edges worn, the image slightly faded, a picture of a car. The car in Ethan's garage, in what appeared to be a controlled indoor testing environment. The car clean, intact, its original paint still showing. A man in coveralls standing beside it with his hand on the hood. Carver stopped at the edge of the driveway. He looked at the car sitting there, rusted and flat-tired, visibly the same car as in the photograph, and yet so altered by time that only someone who was looking specifically for it would have known. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at Ethan. My name is William Carver, he said. His voice was steady. I believe you have something that used to be mine. I know who you are, Ethan said. The 2 men looked at each other. Preston Hale called me, Carver said. He told me about you, about where you found it, about how you found it. He paused. I've had people looking for this vehicle for over a decade. I hired 3 separate firms at various points. None of them found it. It was sitting in a county impound lot. It was in the back row, Ethan said. Partially blocked. Yes. Carver looked at the car again. May I see it? They went into the garage. Carver moved slowly around the car, not touching it. He had the photograph in one hand and he held it up occasionally, comparing. His face was difficult to read, something between grief and recognition. The look of someone encountering a thing they had given up expecting to see again. He stopped at the trunk. The plate is there, Ethan said. Carver closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he crouched down slowly, with the care of a man whose knees had opinions, and looked at the plate without touching it. He stayed crouched for a long time. When he stood, his face had changed. Something had released. The man in this photograph, he said, holding it up, is my chief development engineer. He died in 1998. He's the one who built this car. He's the one who made sure it disappeared from the records rather than let it be scrapped. He looked at Ethan. He never told me. I didn't find out until I started looking, years later, and by then the trail was cold. He folded the photograph carefully and put it in his pocket. Why did he do it? Ethan asked. Carver was quiet for a moment. Because it worked, he said simply. The car worked. The program worked. And the people who shut it down didn't care whether it worked. They cared about the acquisition structure. He didn't want the proof of what we'd built to be destroyed just because it was convenient for a balance sheet. He looked at Ethan. He preserved something real, Carver said, even though no one was watching and no one would know. The garage was quiet. Lily appeared in the doorway from the house. She looked at Carver, then at her father. Carver noticed her and gave her a slight nod, the formal, unpatronizing acknowledgement of an older person who takes children seriously. She came and stood beside Ethan. "Is he a good person?" she whispered. Ethan looked at Carver. "Yeah," he said. "I think so." By the following week, the story had moved through the world of serious collectors the way major discoveries do, quickly among the people who mattered, barely at all among the people who didn't. Preston had been methodical about who he contacted and in what order. He started with 2 authenticators whose opinions carried institutional weight, then moved to a small number of major collectors who were known for discretion. He did not post publicly. He did not issue statements. He moved through quiet channels the way that people who understand value always move, without noise, without performance. The community's response, as relayed through Preston, was something close to stunned. Several people had believed the program had produced no surviving examples. The discovery overturned a consensus that had been in place for over a decade. One man, a collector in Switzerland, who had spent a reported sum in the high 6 figures investigating the program years earlier, sent Preston a single-line message: "I need to come see it." Preston told him politely that he'd have to wait for the authentication process to complete. The authentication itself was already in motion. The spectrometer data had gone to an independent laboratory. The casting mark photographs had been reviewed by a retired metallurgist who had worked in automotive manufacturing for 30 years and had contributed to several landmark authentications. His preliminary conclusion, as shared with Preston: "The marks are genuine. The alloy composition is period consistent. I'd need physical access to issue a formal opinion, but the photographic evidence is not consistent with fabrication." Physical access was arranged. He came on a Thursday. His name was Jerome Calloway, and he was 64, semi-retired, and had the particular kind of authority that comes from knowing you're one of very few people in the world who can do something correctly. He spent 6 hours with the vehicle. He left without saying much. His written conclusion arrived 4 days later, 14 pages, footnoted, with a final section that read, in part, "In my professional judgment, the vehicle under examination represents a genuine surviving unit from the development program in question. The physical evidence is consistent with the internal documentation recovered from archival sources and is not consistent with any known method of fraudulent fabrication." Dale Pruitt heard about it from a buyer he knew who had connections to the collector community. He called Ethan again. This time the call was shorter. "I heard Dale started." "Yeah," Ethan said. "Look, I had no way of knowing." "Nobody did," Ethan said. "It wasn't generous, exactly. It was accurate. Nobody at the lot that day had known what they were looking at. That was the point. Is there anything I can?" "No," Ethan said. "We're fine." He hung up. Preston Hale had initiated the authentication process formally. The documentation chain was being assembled. The manufacturing records recovered from archival sources, the spectrometer analysis, the trunk plate code traced to the internal program records, the engineering specifications cross-referenced against the physical vehicle. It would take months. In the meantime, William Carver had made a proposal. He wanted to fund the full restoration of the vehicle, a meticulous, historically accurate restoration to match the specifications it had when the photograph was taken. He had a facility and a team that did this work. He wanted the car to end in a foundation he was establishing in memory of his chief engineer, a physical museum of development-era automotive history, the kind that existed in no institutional collection. In return, he was prepared to pay Ethan for the vehicle at a figure that Preston had determined was at the low end of authenticated fair market value. Not the auction peak. Carver wasn't interested in auctions. He wanted the car to go somewhere specific, to serve something specific. The number was still larger than anything Ethan had encountered in his life. He'd sat with it for 2 days before he answered. On the 3rd day, he called Carver. "I have one condition," Ethan said. "Namit, there's a photograph I'd like a copy of. The one of the man who built it." Carver was quiet for a moment. "I'll have it framed," he said. The legal process moved carefully and, by the standards of such things, relatively smoothly. The county impound purchase gave Ethan clean title. Carver's legal team had expected complications. There were none. Ethan's own lawyer, a woman named Patricia Drummond, whom he'd found through a referral and who turned out to be precisely as good as advertised, reviewed everything twice. The transfer completed on a Tuesday morning. Ethan signed the documents at a table in Patricia's office. When it was done, she slid an envelope across the table. He didn't open it there. He thanked her, put it in his jacket pocket and drove home. He picked Lily up from school. She got in the truck with her backpack and immediately started telling him about something that had happened at lunch involving a bird and a sandwich. He listened to the whole thing carefully, asking questions at the right moments. When they pulled into the driveway, the space where the car had been was empty. Carver's transport team had come for it 2 days earlier. "It's gone," Lily observed, looking at the empty space. "Yeah." She thought about this. "Is that okay?" Ethan looked at the empty driveway for a moment. "It went where it was supposed to go," he said. "That's okay." He paid the back rent first. He called his landlord, a man named Douglas Wheatley, who had been patient in ways he didn't have to be, and asked if he could stop by. He showed up at Douglas's door with a check, and Douglas looked at it for a long moment and then looked at Ethan and said, "You sure?" And Ethan said yes. The credit card came next. Then a set aside for Lily, not in her name, not accessible, not touching. Something that would be there when she needed it. For school. For whatever came after school. For the things he hadn't been able to promise her before. He put a portion in an account in Sandra's name, not hers anymore, not legally, but in a way that mattered to him. A small foundation, more name than structure, directed toward leukemia research, not because it would change anything in the immediate world, because it was the right shape for his gratitude, the right direction for grief when grief needed somewhere to go. He thought about what Carver had said about his engineer. He preserved something real, even though no one was watching and no one would know. Ethan understood that. The photograph arrived 2 weeks after the transfer, as promised, framed simply dark wood, clean glass. The engineer standing beside the car in the test facility. He looked like a man who believed in what he was doing. Ethan put it on the mantel. On the left side, Sandra's photo on the right. He stood back and looked at both of them. Then he went to the kitchen to make dinner. It was a Wednesday. Lily had homework, a worksheet on patterns that she'd already half completed in the truck on the way home, which was technically against the rules he'd tried to establish, but which he let go because she'd been so focused doing it. He made pasta. Simple, fast. The kind of meal where nothing was trying too hard to be anything other than dinner. Lily sat at the kitchen table and finished her worksheet and then drew on the back of it another horse, this one with a more accurate number of legs. Progress. When the food was ready, she climbed into her chair and waited while he served both plates. "Are we different now?" she asked. He set down the serving spoon and looked at her. It was a 6-year-old's version of a real question. Children ask the questions adults circle around, usually more directly and usually better. "Different how?" he said. She considered. "Like, is everything different now?" "Some things are different," he said. "The worried stuff is less. We have more room." He thought about how to say the next part. "But the important stuff is the same." She thought about that. "Gerald's the same," she said. "Yes. And you're the same." "Yes." "Okay," she said, apparently satisfied. She picked up her fork. He sat down across from her. Through the kitchen window, the late evening light was coming in at a low angle, the way spring light does, long and amber, finding the edges of things. It touched the counter, the wall, the side of Lily's face as she bent over her plate. Ethan looked at his daughter. He thought about the car. About the man who had built it and hidden it and never told anyone, who had looked at something real and decided it was worth preserving even when no one was watching. About Dale Pruitt laughing in the lot. About Lily's hand in his, small and certain. About the photograph on the mantel and the empty space in the driveway. He picked up his fork. He ate. Outside, the neighborhood settled into its ordinary evening. A dog barking somewhere down the block. The sound of a lawnmower. A car passing, ordinary sounds. Unremarkable, the world going about its business with no awareness of what had moved through it. Inside, a man and his daughter ate pasta in a quiet kitchen. The light came through the window. The horse on the back of the worksheet watched from the table. Gerald, the elephant, was upstairs on the bed, waiting for bedtime in the patient way of things that know they're needed. In the morning, Ethan would drive his truck, still the same truck, the one that ran and passed inspection, and got them where they needed to go, to a job on the far side of the county. A brake job for a woman named Ruth Calloway, who drove a 2007 Honda and had been a loyal customer for 2 years. He would work carefully, as he always did, checking everything twice. He would charge her the same rate he'd always charged. He would drive home in time to pick up Lily from school. The money was real. The security was real. The fact of a future that had room in it that was real too, and newer than the rest. And he was still getting used to it, the way you get used to a house that finally has proper heat after years of compensating. You stop bracing for the cold. It takes time to stop bracing. But the man doing those things, the man driving the truck, working the job, Picking up his daughter was the same man who had stood in a salvage lot and crouched beside a rusted car and seen something that everyone else had walked past. That had always been true. It was just more visible now. And Ethan Cole, who had never needed the world to see him clearly in order to see the world clearly himself, ate his pasta, listened to his daughter talk, and let the evening be what it was. Because some things don't need to be said. Some things just need to be true. It wasn't the car that changed his life. It was the way he'd learned to see, to stop in front of what the world had already walked past, to look a second longer than anyone else thought was worth it. That was the thing no one had ever laughed at, because no one had ever seen it.